Viewer discretion is advised. This story contains intense subject matter and is presented solely for educational and informational purposes. The following is a dramatized version of testimony reported by Inner City Press. Nobody saw it coming. The courtroom had been tense, whispers among reporters, attorneys shuffling papers, eyes fixated on the doors, waiting for the next witness. Then, without announcement, the back doors swung open, and in walked Will Smith. Gasps. Even the judge hesitated. No entourage, no lawyer, just Will, stepping forward on his own terms. Until that moment, he'd been silent. Headlines screamed his name. Audio leaks circulated, too disturbing for public release. But Will had said nothing. Something had changed. Maybe it was betrayal. Maybe it was that tape. Whatever it was, Will was finished hiding. He didn't walk in as a celebrity. He walked in as a man who'd seen too much and kept it to himself for far too long. And when he finally spoke, the courtroom wasn't ready. The day had started like any other in the Diddy trial. The press leaned in from their reserved rows. Lawyers traded quiet strategies, the usual rhythm of federal court. Then it all shifted. Will Smith entered through the side doors, alone. No press statement, no handler. Just him. People froze. He walked to the stand slowly, deliberately. The bravado of the Fresh Prince was gone. This version of Will was stripped down, raw, unshaken, but clearly not unscarred. Diddy, lounging at the defense table moments before, suddenly sat upright, alert, anxious. Will didn't even look at him. "I wasn't summoned here," Will said calmly. "I asked to be here." The judge gave a nod. And from that moment on, the trial wasn't just about Diddy. It became about power, silence, and the things people aren't supposed to talk about. Will's voice was steady, but beneath it was something heavy. He recounted how it all began, not with blackmail or threats, but with a party invitation. A celebration, they called it. Just networking, music, relaxation, so he went. But when he arrived, nothing felt right. A mansion in the hills, black SUVs out front, security thicker than any movie set he'd been on. And then they took his phone. They said it was for privacy. But it felt like control, Will said. Inside, the air was strange. Music played, but not the kind you dance to, more like a trance. Lights low, mirrors everywhere. Will said Diddy approached him with a smile that felt wrong, not welcoming, possessive. He was led to a back room, and what he saw, there were people doing things. Men, women, some I knew, some too young, and others just watching. Will paused, and Diddy, like it was just normal. After the party, Will got a call. Blocked number. "Hope you had fun, Fresh Prince," the voice said. Then came the envelope. No return address. Inside, a flash drive. He almost threw it away, but curiosity won. What he saw? Footage from the party. There he was, on a couch, dazed, laughing, clearly out of it. And a voice, Diddy's voice, saying, "That's how we keep him." The fear set in. "I realized I wasn't invited. I was initiated." From that moment on, things changed. Invitations kept coming. He declined. Then movie roles vanished. Collaborators ghosted him. Rumors exploded online about his mental health, his sexuality, his marriage. Diddy never said anything directly. He didn't have to. Silence was the cost of peace. So Will stayed quiet. But inside, the truth burned. Every time someone else spoke up, Cassie, Meek Mill, Don Richard, he'd ask himself, "Why am I still silent?" Will continued. Diddy didn't just ruin careers, he engineered fear. He described an incident in 2013, a luxury brand deal, locked in, lookbook done, weeks from launch, then suddenly dropped. No explanation. 2 weeks later, another party invitation from Diddy. When he declined, blog stories appeared. Specific ones. Personal details only someone on the inside would know. It wasn't paranoia, Will said. It was punishment. He wasn't the only one. Will told the court there were others. Many, some bound by contracts, others too scared to speak. They weren't Diddy's friends. They were his survivors. Then came 2016, a charity gala, A-list attendees, CEOs, politicians, and Diddy holding court in the background like a kingmaker. Will recalled one executive whispering, "Only you get the final cut," while handing Diddy a USB. He wasn't networking, Will said. He was gatekeeping. What broke Will's silence? A phone call. Not from press, not prosecutors, but someone he once trusted. "Will, you're on one of those tapes," they said. They played it in court. Will's world cracked. He hadn't remembered being recorded, but now everything clicked. The party, the envelope, the anxiety, the shame. He called the prosecution himself. "I'm ready," he told them. "Whatever you need, I'll talk." He listened to the audio, alone with lawyers and the judge. He heard himself laughing, but it wasn't real. It sounded drugged, he said. Then he heard Diddy's voice. That's how we break them in. And then they said his name while doing things he didn't dare repeat. That tape didn't just embarrass me, Will said. It stripped me of my humanity. He wiped a tear. I never consented to being recorded. I never wanted to be part of that. But Diddy kept it. For years, Will suffered panic attacks. Interviews triggered dread. He thought he was broken. Now he understood. He wasn't broken. He was remembering trauma he had forced himself to forget. Before he finished, Will turned to the jury. If you want to know how powerful Diddy is, ask yourself, how can someone like me be silenced for 20 years and not even realize it? The courtroom was breathless. Diddy stared forward, blank, pale. Will looked tired, but unburdened. When allowed a final word, he walked toward Diddy and said, "You built an empire on manipulation. You called it love, but it was fear. I saw what you did. I heard what you said when you thought I wasn't listening. You broke people for sport." He held up an old photo. This was me, 2004, right before that first party. He looked at it. I haven't seen that man in years. To the jury, he said, "This isn't just about one night or one man. It's a network built to silence truth. And if we don't tear it down, it keeps going." He turned back to Diddy. "You said nobody parties like Diddy? Well, nobody lies like you either." Then he walked out. No applause, no statement, just silence, and the weight of 20 years left behind him. He built an empire on platinum hits, celebrity parties, and untouchable fame. For decades, Sean "Diddy" Combs was seen as the embodiment of success, a self-made legend who rose from the streets to dominate the music industry. But behind the glitz, there were whispers, stories that never made the headlines, allegations that were too wild to believe, until now. Because what's coming out in court isn't just scandal, it's something darker, something that sounds more like a Hollywood thriller than real life. In sworn testimony, a former assistant says she was kidnapped at gunpoint. Another claims she was forced into degrading sexual situations while working under constant fear. And then there's the rapper, whose car was allegedly firebombed after getting too close to Diddy's girlfriend. We're not talking about messy breakups or celebrity drama. We're talking about accusations of sex trafficking, racketeering, and violence. The kind of charges that come with decades behind bars. So what really happened behind the velvet ropes of Diddy's inner circle? Was this all the fallout of toxic relationships, or something closer to a criminal empire hiding in plain sight? Let's start with one night in 2011, when Diddy allegedly showed up with a gun, ready to kill. Capricorn Clark, Diddy's former assistant, was at home when an unexpected knock shattered the calm. What stood behind that door wasn't just her boss. It was a man enraged, armed, and ready for revenge. "Get dressed," Diddy reportedly growled. "We're going to kill this Clark says he wasn't bluffing. In court, she described the moment in chilling detail. Diddy had found out that Kid Cudi, yes, the multi-platinum rapper, was dating his girlfriend at the time, singer Cassie. And in Diddy's world, betrayal wasn't something you cried about. It was something you punished. According to Clark, she was forced into his vehicle as they drove straight to the Hollywood Hills, their target, Kid Cudi's home. With a member of Diddy's security team by his side and a gun in hand, the message was clear. This wasn't just a confrontation, this was a mission. But when they arrived, Cudi wasn't there. That one detail may have saved a life, but it didn't stop what came next. Clark says what followed was a downward spiral of violence and intimidation. She would later tell a Bad Boy Records executive the full story, describing it in simple, haunting words. "Puff kidnapped me with a gun." The incident was swept under the rug for years. No police reports, no headlines, just another night in a world where power silences everything. But it wouldn't stay quiet forever, because just weeks later, something happened that made this story impossible to ignore. If the break-in at Kid Cudi's house felt like a warning, what happened next felt like retaliation. Just weeks after Diddy and his security team allegedly stormed Cudi's Hollywood Hills property, the unthinkable happened. In January 2012, Cudi's car, parked outside his home, exploded in flames. Yes, you read that right. Someone firebombed his car. And this wasn't some anonymous act of vandalism. During Diddy's ongoing trial, police testified that the car spotted fleeing the scene was registered to one of Diddy's own companies. That wasn't a coincidence. That was a link. Cudi himself took the stand. Calm but serious, he confirmed the attack. adding weight to what many already suspected, that the break-in and the bombing were connected, that the warning turned into an act of violence, and that the man behind it might have been one of the most powerful figures in entertainment. Think about that. A global superstar gets involved with the wrong woman, and suddenly his house is broken into and his car goes up in flames. If this were a movie, it would be dismissed as too far-fetched. But this wasn't fiction. This was sworn testimony given in front of a jury. And if that kind of intimidation really happened to someone like Kid Cudi, imagine what it was like for the people who worked under Diddy every single day. The assistants, the employees, the women. One of them says what happened behind closed doors made the firebombing look tame. By now, the public had seen Diddy as a hitmaker, a businessman, maybe even a bit of a control freak. But no one expected what Cassie, the woman at the center of it all, would reveal under oath. According to her testimony, Diddy didn't just manipulate behind the scenes. He orchestrated entire nights of exploitation. She called them freak-offs. These weren't parties. These weren't consensual hangouts. These were events, Cassie claimed, where she was trapped, pressured into sexual encounters with male escorts at luxury hotels and private homes, all allegedly funded and arranged by Diddy himself. She said it wasn't optional. She felt trapped. That word came up again and again, like she was a prisoner in designer clothes, stuck inside a twisted fantasy she couldn't escape. And Cassie wasn't the only one setting up these nights. Capricorn Clark, the same assistant who said Diddy once kidnapped her, testified that she helped organize the freak-offs too. She booked the rooms. She arranged the details. Sometimes, she said, she even helped procure illegal substances, all under Diddy's direction. Now here's the disturbing part. Clark says she was kidnapped twice, once by Diddy, once by his bodyguards. And yet, after all of that, she came back. That's how deep the manipulation ran. That's how blurred the line became between employee, victim, and accomplice. Diddy's lawyers claim these encounters were consensual. They say he's a flawed man, sure, jealous, volatile, but not a criminal. But if you believe the testimonies, it wasn't just about sex or drugs. It was about power, total, terrifying power. And the story doesn't stop there, because another woman came forward, and her account painted an even darker picture. Mia's story, a best friend or a predator? She called him her best friend, her mentor, her boss. But what Mia says happened behind closed doors was anything but friendly. Testifying under a pseudonym, Mia told the court that during her time as Diddy's personal assistant, she was sexually assaulted on multiple occasions. Not once, multiple times. And yet, she stayed for years. Why? Because according to her, Diddy didn't just blur boundaries, he erased them. One minute he was showering her with kindness, treating her like family. The next, she says, he turned into someone cold, cruel, and predatory. I felt like I was worthless, she testified, like I was just a piece of crap. And that's the twisted pattern starting to emerge, a cycle of charm, control, and coercion. Diddy's inner circle wasn't just staffed with employees. It was filled with people who, depending on the day, didn't know if they were being rewarded or destroyed. But there's a reason why this case is so hard to untangle. Many of those closest to Diddy didn't just work for him. They sometimes helped carry out his orders. Mia's testimony echoed Clark's. Both were paid assistants. Both claimed they were abused, and both said they were made to participate in questionable activities. That's the legal gray zone prosecutors now have to navigate. Were these women victims, accomplices, or both? It's the kind of question that makes juries squirm and gives defense attorneys just enough room to create doubt. But prosecutors argue that Diddy built a system, one that thrived on fear, blurred loyalty, and just enough luxury to keep people from walking away. And if that's true, then what we're looking at isn't just an abusive boss. It's something far more organized and far more dangerous. At this point, it's not just about individual acts of violence or abuse. Prosecutors are painting a much bigger picture, one that links all of Diddy's alleged actions under a single chilling umbrella: racketeering. To prove it, they've introduced a theory straight out of the kind of crime cases usually reserved for mafia trials, that Diddy wasn't just a flawed celebrity, but the head of a criminal enterprise. Sounds extreme? That's what his defense team is banking on. But under the law, racketeering isn't just about organized crime in the traditional sense. It's about a pattern, a network of illegal acts committed through a group or business, and that's where things get serious. According to federal prosecutors, Diddy used his record label, Bad Boy Entertainment, and its employees as tools to carry out illegal activities. Not just one or two, but a whole system. Assaults, trafficking, coercion, intimidation, all allegedly carried out by people on his payroll. Former federal prosecutor Rachel Maiman summed it up. They're linking the crimes to his business, and it checks out. Cassie, Clark, Mia, all of them worked for him. All of them say they helped arrange the very acts they're now testifying about. Whether it was booking hotel rooms for freak-offs or procuring drugs, the alleged crimes weren't just personal. They were operational, systematic. This theory hinges on proving that Diddy didn't act alone, that he relied on a web of assistants, security guards, and staff to enforce his will and carry out his orders. And yes, some of those people might have been victims, but prosecutors argue that doesn't let him off the hook. In fact, it makes it worse. They say this was a den of thieves, a term pulled straight from the courtroom, a world where everyone had something to gain and too much to lose by saying no. And the prosecution wants the jury to see this not as scattered moments of rage or jealousy, but as the operations of a man who built a kingdom of silence, fear, and control. Still, not everyone is convinced. From day one, Diddy's lawyers have tried to reframe the narrative. Yes, they admit, their client can be volatile, jealous, even violent at times. But a criminal mastermind? They say that label goes too far. In opening statements, the defense called Diddy a very flawed individual, a superstar whose temper sometimes exploded, but whose private life, they insist, still revolved around consent. Cassie's freak-offs? According to the defense, those were consensual encounters between adults. The drugs, the hotel rooms, the escorts, everything, they claim, was voluntary and paid for in the open. Their strategy is simple. Break the chain. Prosecutors call a criminal enterprise. Under racketeering law, you need a pattern of crimes tied to an enterprise. Isolated scandals won't cut it, so the defense keeps chipping away at every link. No direct charges for the worst acts. Despite the firebombed car and alleged assaults, Diddy was never indicted for those incidents. Lack of charges equals reasonable doubt, they argue. Victims or accomplices? If Cassie, Clark, and Mia helped arrange hotel suites or procure contraband, were they victims or willing participants cashing six-figure paychecks? The blurred roles could muddy the jury's sympathy. The forgiveness email. 2 years after she says she was kidnapped, Capricorn Clark emailed Diddy begging for forgiveness without explaining why. The defense holds it up as proof that relationships were complicated, not criminal. Expert skepticism. Veteran lawyer Mark Zauderer reminds jurors that lots of violence doesn't guarantee a racketeering conviction. The law demands proof of an organized system, not just shocking stories. And every time prosecutors highlight another explosive allegation, the defense leans on one word: motive. They hint at disgruntled ex-employees chasing payouts or headlines, hoping the jury will question every memory and every tear shed on the stand. But skepticism cuts both ways, because each witness also brings receipts, texts, hotel records, security logs, small bits of evidence that, when stacked together, look less like random chaos and more like policy. So the trial marches on, a tug-of-war between scandal and certainty. Is Diddy merely a temperamental mogul who crossed too many lines, or the architect of a shadow empire built on fear? The jury will have to decide, and the answer could change the definition of power in the music industry forever. Because next comes the moment prosecutors have been building toward, the final attempt to weave every fragment into one unmistakable pattern. When the courtroom lights go dark and the cameras stop flashing, one question will linger. Was Diddy's kingdom built on beats or on fear? What we know for certain is that the accusations stacked against him read like the plot of a thriller: gunpoint kidnappings, orchestrated freak-offs, and a car turned to ash outside a superstar's home. We also know the defense insists every scandal can be explained. Consenting adults, messy breakups, overblown grudges. Somewhere between those extremes sits the truth, waiting for 12 jurors to decide whether it's crime or chaos. Remember, racketeering isn't about a single bad night. Prosecutors must prove a pattern, an organized machine that kept victims trapped and accomplices paid. They've offered witnesses who claim they lived that machine every day. The defense has countered with doubt, emails, and the reminder that no one has yet served a single day in prison for these claims. So what happens if the jury agrees there was an enterprise? It could upend the way we view celebrity power forever, because if a man with Grammys and global influence can be convicted of trafficking and coercion, it signals that fame is no longer an iron shield. If the jury acquits, the message shifts. Allegations alone can't topple an empire unless the proof is airtight. Either way, the verdict will echo far beyond one man. Assistants, artists, and fans are already asking tougher questions. Who holds the powerful accountable? How many secrets hide behind platinum plaques? And for every aspiring mogul watching, the trial is a stark warning. The bigger the throne, the brighter the spotlight, and the harder the fall if the receipts come due. So, as the jury prepares to deliberate, keep an eye on the courthouse steps, because whether Sean Diddy Combs walks out a free man or is led away to face decades behind bars, one thing is clear: the music industry's glossy veneer just cracked wide open, and the echoes of that fracture will be felt long after the final gavel drops.